Thanks, Ben. I have to say, my favorite introduction was about 20 years ago when I was at Northwestern, and a colleague of mine, Bob Williams, said, "This is David Culver. Let's see if he has anything interesting to say." So I've always sort of tried to take that to heart. Uh, I love this title because it's been I've been able to use it for 20 years. For a long time, I talked about all the difficulties of measuring subterranean biodiversity. But today, I really want to focus more on the global aspects and the results, and gloss over all of the sort of dirty work that's involved in producing that. Uh, my collaborators are Magda Alancic. Magda is the GIS person. Uh, Ann Bedos and Louis Darwin from Paris, who may be listening tonight, uh, who are experts both on the terrestrial cave fauna, but particularly on the tropics. And Tanya Pepon, who is an expert on the Denaric Karst uh, fauna, among other things. So why do we want to try to measure biodiversity? Well, for one thing, there's a lot of data because what we're looking at are lists of species. How many species does this cave? How many species does that cave? So in fact, there's an extensive data set. And caves are perhaps the best example of multiple cases of convergent and parallel evolution. They're of enormous conservation importance. Half the species at risk in the Nature Reserve database are subterranean. They're a model for endemic biotas with reduced opportunities for dispersal. And everybody loves a list. No matter what the list is of, like bad actors, good fauna, bad fauna. So it's something that sort of captures imagination. So we had some predecessors in this, and I'm just going to highlight four of them. One is Tom Barr, who's a famous speleologist from North America. Tom studied a group of small beetles, which if you've been in a cave in the U.S., you have probably seen but ignored. There are several hundred species. And among the places where there's the most species is Mammoth Cave. And Tom remarked way back in 1967 that this was interesting because the question was, how could all of these species coexist and not outcompete each other? Not so long after that, Frank Howarth pointed out that the Hawaiian lava tube fauna was very rich, and that this idea, which is very prevalent and still is, that it was the Pleistocene glaciation that forced species into caves doesn't work, because guess what? There was, for all intents and purposes, no Pleistocene in Hawaii. So he expanded and made us all look more globally instead of saying the cave fauna is a north temperate fauna. Boris Sked, working in Slovenia and more generally in ex-Yugoslavia and the Denaric Karst, championed the idea that species richness in the Denaric Karst was higher than any place else in the world. And finally, Janine Javert. Janine started a program called Pascalis. You can see on the slide protocols for the assessment and conservation of aquatic life in the subsurface. I don't know how many bottles of wine it took them to get that, but it's a nice acronym. Janine was able to put together a multinational group of people and really set a high bar for the way we study it, established techniques for it, and did a series of analysis. Unfortunately, Janine passed away about 15 years ago, so she couldn't really see the results of this groundbreaking study that she did. Those of you who have struggled, women who have struggled in the U.S. In academia to be recognized, take heart. It was even harder for Janine. It was a combination of force of personality and lots of euros that got people to work on this project. Anyway, she's the major figure in in the previous study of biodiversity. So why is it so hard to measure subterranean biodiversity? If I want to measure birds or butterflies, I can go out and I can do some observations, and if I do enough, I think I found everything. But the difficulty in caves, besides the difficulty of just collecting in caves, is that most of the diversity is between caves. That is, different caves have different species. Because of the restricted dispersal between caves, it means that in order to get an estimate of the total number of species in an area, you need a lot of caves. An example is that we worked out fairly well for the US, and Europe is 100 caves for 5,000 square kilometers. 5,000 square kilometers is not very big. That's, say, much smaller than the average US county. Even more difficult is that even in well-studied areas, there are a number of species that are undescribed, and that there are many caves that have not even been explored biologically. I estimate that in Slovenia, which is arguably the best studied country in the world for its fauna, that less than 20% have actually been, have any kind of even nominal collection, albeit it's almost all the large ones do. So Boris Skett and I thought maybe there's a way around this problem, and this is that we only look at individual hotspot caves, that is, caves that have high numbers of species, then we can include the rest of the world. We're not limited to the US, maybe parts of Brazil and Europe. So if we want to do this, then we need to make sure that individual caves, ones that are very rich in species, are bellwethers for overall species richness. And so I just want to briefly make the case for this. For my entire life, people have said, oh, we don't really know much about the biology of caves in the tropics. That's actually nonsense. We don't know everything, of course. There's a lot missing. This is a map that Louis and Ann did in 2019 of caves in Southeast Asia that are well studied. I'll let them expound about what well studied is, but they really mean well studied. They mean that, for example, that you have some of the very smallest of columbella described from there. So this is clearly enough to get a geographic sampling of an area that we think of as not having been very well studied. If we look at the distribution of the number of species per cave, this is actually the number of aquatic species per cave in the Slovenian Karst. I direct your attention to the lower right corner. There is one cave there with 45 species at the time of this paper. That is Postojna Jama, Postojnska Jama. And I think that perhaps it's typical of cave areas that you have a few of these really rich caves that can come to represent the whole region. This is to actually have you all really understand this would probably take the rest of the time. So what this is I'll try to be brief. It's a way that of sampling the number of species in an area. We assign a species to hexagons. Why hexagons? The same reason that soccer balls have hexagons. Squares don't work so well on spheres. And if you do this and do a random sampling with replacement, then you can generate a curve. And this is for areas that have more than 150 caves that have good data for. And it includes sites, obviously, in the US, as well as 2 French sites, Ariège and Ardèche, and Slovenia. The thing to notice, if you ignore West Virginia for the moment, is that these curves don't intersect. I don't need to go to all of this trouble to know that Ariège is the richest site, because I can learn this from a relatively small number of samples. So this idea that curves don't cross except for West Virginia, and I have no idea why it's an anomaly here. It just is. We can, with a lot less work, we can figure out who's the richest and so on. Okay, Boris and I in 2000 said, it'd be interesting to write to all of our colleagues and glean the literature to see how many caves there are and wells, other karst sites, that have 20 or more obligate species. Obligate species usually, but not always, have no pigment or eyes. And so we were able to accumulate this list. We got 20, it's kind of nice. We have 20 caves with 20 species. And you can see that the majority of these are north temperate, and among those, the majority are European. There are only 2 tropical or subtropical sites in this initial paper. One is Tualalak in Indonesia, and the other one is a bad air lava tube in Australia. So this is just to repeat this. The vast majority of sites were European. And I would say that neither Boris nor I thought that this was going to be a particularly important paper. We published it in the Journal of Cave and Karst Studies, which is a fine journal, but if you think you've got something really important, you probably put it someplace where more people read it. Anyway, mostly because it was an opportune time for this. This paper is a paper of Boris's and a paper of mine that's been referred to more times than any other. It's not the paper we'd have chosen to be known for, but that we didn't get to choose that. The important and very positive thing about this is that it prompted the publication and the creation of lots of lists of species. You might say, why didn't they exist before? Well, because most biologists studied either beetles or millipedes or spiders and didn't do an overall general collection. So it really was not until the invention of Excel that we could actually do this and do this in an efficient way. So it really prompted a lot of work. We continued this, and this is basically the latest result. Instead of having 20 species total, this map shows those caves and sites that have either 20 aquatic species or 20 terrestrial species, or have 20 of both. The ones in blue are the aquatic sites. And if you look at that, you can see, particularly if you also include the inset from Europe, that most of the sites, aquatic sites, are north temperate. So it's in a way it repeats what we knew in 2000, that most of these sites are in the north temperate zone. The terrestrial zone is very different, as we'll see in a minute, and requires a different explanation as well. So just by the numbers, the total number of caves with either 19 or more, or TB stands for troglobites, which are the terrestrial species, or 19 or more stegobionts, which are the aquatic species. We use 19 because there were several species or several sites right on the edge, and there were none with 18 or 17. So we sort of relaxed our criteria by one species. That gives us a total of 35 sites globally. Of those sites, 23 were just terrestrial sites, 17 were just aquatic sites, and 5, and all of those 5 were in the Dinaric Karst. Dinaric Karst runs from the extreme northeast corner of Italy to Albania. So here's a map of a pie chart. Some of you know I love pie charts. And this simply shows you the distribution by continent. Oceania is to include sites like the Canary Islands, which is politically part of Europe and geographically part of Africa, but Canarios probably just see themselves as Canarios. Anyway, I put those separately. You can see that for the aquatic hotspots, the majority, nearly 3/4 of the sites are European. So this is very much a north temperate uh, uh, European phenomenon. Uh, the North American sites are only two. Uh, the San Marcos Well, which Ben Schwartz knows very well, and Comal Springs. Uh, Otherwise, we have no sites that have 20 species. The terrestrial pattern is different. We still see, one site in Australia. We see now several sites in South America, particularly Brazil. We see uh, more sites in North America, including Mexico, and a number of sites in Asia, particularly tropical and subtropical Asia. The European sites now have diminished in their importance overall when we look at it in this way. So here's the top five uh, uh, aquatic hotspots, just to give you some sense of what these are. Walsingham Cave, it's an anchialine cave in Bermuda. Anchialine caves are caves that have a direct connection or have a connection to the sea. So they have a freshwater lens, Gagum iceberg lens, sorry, and also have sort of more organic material available. San Marcos Well, which is in Texas, is chemolitho-autotrophic. That is, it produces its own energy in the absence of sunlight. The other three are in what we call the Biodiversity Ridge, which I show you here. The Biodiversity Ridge is the one that runs along the French-Spanish border, up along northern Italy, and then down through the Dinaric Karst to Montenegro, where then we don't know really where it goes, if it goes anywhere. So this is what we call the ridge. It's the one feature of biodiversity that we've known for a while, and it's true for both aquatic and terrestrial species. The reason is probably a combination of high density of caves, but more importantly, this is also the highest area of productivity in terms of surface productivity. So there's more food available in that sense. So we can look now at the map of Pleistocene glaciation, which includes the permafrost and maximum glaciation in different colors, as well as now these are the aquatic hotspots. And in fact, except for the chemolitho-autotrophic sites in Bermuda and the Canary Islands and Texas, the sites are really quite close to the Pleistocene boundary. The gray areas are karst areas, by the way. So it looks like maybe that the Pleistocene had some role in this, although it is not clear what it is. The age of this fauna is much older than the Pleistocene, but nevertheless, the distribution stays the same. Stays close to the edge of the glaciation. Well, the terrestrial sites are, in a way, more interesting because it's such a different pattern. We have the Vjetrenica cave in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is near Dubrovnik, and the Postojna Planina cave system, both of which are part of the Dinaric Karst and part of the ridge biodiversity. We have Cueva del Viento, which is a large lava tube in the Canary Islands. And we have two caves in Brazil, one a large karstic cave, Aqua Clara, and a very strange anomalous cave, Igatu cave system in quartzite. Yes, quartzite. I know caves don't form in quartzite, but here it is. And that's an anomaly I'll come back to mention that again. So how can we explain the distribution of terrestrial hotspots? Well, guess what? The Pleistocene doesn't really help us except in Europe. And there's a lot of evidence that at least that while not the initial invasion, the distribution of species in Europe was profoundly affected by the Pleistocene. And you can see that all of the sites in the Denari Karst shown on the inset are actually close to the glacial boundary. This isn't to say that other factors like productivity and cave density are not important, but at least in Europe, those sites are close to the Pleistocene boundary. In North America, it's not true. We have two Alabama caves, Surprise Cave and Fern Cave, thanks to Matt Niemiller's work, and Mammoth Cave. None of those are near the Pleistocene boundary. And if you think about North America, just to say why the Pleistocene may be important sometimes, but not always. There's two places where we have a lot of caves at the boundary. One of which is in Pennsylvania, and the other one is in southern Indiana. The story of why does Indiana have a relatively rich fauna? Because it's close to the Pleistocene. Why does Pennsylvania have such a depauperate fauna? Because it's close to the Pleistocene. So you can see that doesn't work very well. And so we don't really know. But it's clear that the Pleistocene cannot explain the distribution of these hotspot caves. Somewhat more help is to look at ecoregions. And this is simply a map of forests, temperate and tropical forests. And you can see that for the most part, all of the terrestrial caves are located in broadleaf forests. So what is it about broadleaf forests that would promote them being a hot spot? Well, one would be that's probably a greater source of species to invade, that is from the leaf litter of those forests. But that was a long time ago, and there's no guarantee that these sites were actually forested at the time of invasion. But so it's a little unclear exactly what this means. It may have something to do with food supply again, but there is a really remarkable association between broadleaf forests and the distribution of species. So if we combine the idea of the Pleistocene with the idea of broadleaf forest, we can at least have maybe it's a bullshit explanation, but an explanation of the distribution of hotspot caves. And I want to just briefly say a little bit about protection. This simply shows that a lot of these caves are protected either internationally through the UN, or nationally or regionally. Not all, but if you sort of follow along, there's relatively few caves that don't have some protection. Perhaps it's these days of the Trump administration, the idea that the government protection is forever is a joke. And we think that we should also look at two other ways that these caves are protected. One is by inaccessibility. That, of course, changes, but a number of the caves, particularly in Southeast Asia, are really inaccessible. The cave, I should say the cave in Mexico, I didn't mention, is Huatla. That's a very rich site. The third way, and perhaps most controversial, is that a number of these sites are also commercial caves. Now, commercial caves do two things. They really trash the area where tours go, particularly from light pollution and other ways as well. Even with the best efforts, it's still major disruption. Almost all of the commercial caves actually include only a small fraction of the whole cave. And commercial caves, usually ownership of commercial caves is not sympathetic to any other development nearby. And so sort of it appears to be some protection from that way. But it simply wanted to show you this map of the protected status and to say maybe we shouldn't emphasize government protection quite so much as we have been. Well, I thought I could explain everything except Igadu Cave. Quartzite caves are very old. So Augusto Auler tells me so so there's a lot of time to accumulate fauna. Beyond that, don't really understand why there's anything special. There's a cave in Africa that harbors some very ancient arthropods that lends some credence to the idea that they're very old. And even if they're not special, they're just so old. It's kind of like the kid with perfect attendance, it's just been there. It just stays there and eventually gets a lot of species. And so the question is, what's the future hold? Well, we can look at individual groups like fish, which has been done. I didn't talk about this tonight. Just to say, the hotspot for fish is China, no doubt about it. Please forgive the misspelling of especially. The hyporheic, which is the underflow of rivers and streams, we did not consider, but it's clear that first off that a lot of the species in that underflow are eyeless and without pigment, and that there's also a lot of species involved. And here's just an example. Art Palmer used to say you could always tell a biology talk because there are a bunch of stupid lists. So I thought I'd include a list for everybody. This is just a list of species that are found in the underflow of the Sava River in Slovenia. There are the Danube also has very rich sites. We, the authors, are not experts in this, and not that many sites have been analyzed, so we leave that to someone else. We're also working assiduously to expand the idea of these points to regions, just using the data themselves and saying, what are the regions with similar characteristics that we might be able to find more hotspot caves. But that work is in progress. Another way of saying it hasn't worked yet. And let me just close. Emil Rakovici is revered by almost all European cave biologists. He wrote an essay called An Essay on Biospeleology in French, even though he's Romanian, in 1909 at the start of his career. And he was very prescient in some of the things that he talked about. And everybody, he was also just dead wrong about a lot of things as well, as far as I'm concerned. What people don't talk about is what a wonderful writer he was. You get a little sense of this from this translation. It must be admitted that we know almost nothing about this subject, geography. I think it cannot be otherwise because all geographical studies seem to me premature, even for the best studied group, the beetles. Certainly one can enjoy building statistical tables and arranging names in beautiful columns, but the importance of such a work would be nil. Well, he said that 120 years ago almost, but there's still people that would say that now. And so I thought I would give the doubters the last word here. And this is just a list of references if anybody still has a modicum of interest in this topic of places to look for that. So I thank you for your attention. I try to keep it short because nobody likes a long after dinner talk, and be happy to answer questions.